Hey everyone, big thanks for supporting the podcast. We really do appreciate it. If you want to hear more from us, hit the subscribe button or press the bell icon for future updates. It's very
Brilliant.
warm in here.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, Meg,
Welcome, Meg.
Thanks for having me.
to the Superfly Sessions. If you could just introduce yourself and what you do, who you are.
Oh my God.
What's your name? Where'd you come from?
Existential question.
Yeah.
So I'm Meg, and I run a company called The Joy Project. I am a ICF trained life and ADHD coach. And yeah, I've been going for about 2 years now. I'm very lucky. I live in the Lake District. I live in the mountains, which is like my happy place.
Wow.
I know.
For God's sake. Like,
I predominantly, my little like tagline, if you like, is that I help millennial good girls get the hell out of their own way. Can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah,
Is that
man.
acceptable?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I help millennial good girls get the fuck out of their own way. God, that's so unprofessional, isn't it? But it's true. That's what I do.
Amazing. So this is probably quite a profound question, but how I think ADHD especially has become part of the forefront of a lot of kind of like neurodiverse conversations.
For sure.
And there has been kind of a kind of, it's kind of blown up to some degree in people to be at the forefront of people's brains, I think, especially when we're talking in the workplace. But how have you got to this? How have you got to this moment, this job, this career?
Yeah, so if I'm really honest, like I have always had in the back of my head that I wanted to be self-employed, I think.
Yes.
And I did journalism at uni, so I got a journalism degree. I loved my course, but I didn't quite feel cut out to be like cutthroat journalist. And then like in my 20s, I just had so many different jobs. Like I worked in event management. I ran festivals. I did artist liaison. I did some like random marketing bits and pieces. And then I ended up in internal comms and like employee engagement and stuff. But so that there was like this thing, like this trail, if you like, throughout my CV of basically like just wanted to like help people.
Yeah,
Like,
that's what I had in my head, helping people.
Yeah, I just wanted to help people.
Yeah.
And I guess in
You
a way
are a
that-
people person as well, so it does come naturally.
I think there was like a positive. I am toxically positive, like I happily say that. So it was like helping people in a positive way.
Yeah.
And
No matter what.
no matter what,
Against their
At
will.
any
whether they
cost.
like it or not. Yeah. So and then around what would it have been? Gosh, I'm going to get my dates wrong here, but
21?
21.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So 2021,
Nice.
I had been working as an internal comms manager, doing like employee engagement and stuff for a really cool, prestigious company down in South Wales. And it was great, but I'd kind of got as far as I could get with it. And I was having quite big ideas and aspirations, which the company just weren't comfortable with, really. And I was like, it's time to move on. So I decided that I should probably work for an agency. And the self-employed thing was always in the back of my head. Like I freelanced in events and just random bits, but there was
So you'd got a bit of experience in that field.
yeah, but I never had like the enough belief, I guess, if you like, or whatever it was I was looking at. Like I was like, right, so freelance and events. Oh, I don't know if I want to do that full time, because like anybody who works in the event industry will know you work in it full time. That it's your life, basically. So
It's like a double full-time job.
yeah, so it didn't feel quite right. So at the time I was coming across this thing around like multi-passionate or like squiggly careers and stuff, and I was like, I could do that. I could have
What's
like
a squiggly career?
so it's basically you do a few different things. So you're like a generalist rather than like a specialist.
Squiggly.
Squiggly career. It's
totally using that.
It's a really good company. Look them up on LinkedIn.
That's it.
So I was like, I could do that.
Yeah.
I'll work for an agency. Found this role with an agency. It was fully remote, and I was like, I've hit the jackpot here. Like it's what everybody wants. Obviously, you know, with the pandemic and stuff.
Yeah.
Started working for this agency. I'd never worked for an agency before, and I hit roadblock after roadblock. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And I started to realise that there were some things about me and the way my brain works that I had been basically fucking covering up my entire career.
Yeah.
So I must have been with the job about, what would I have been? About a year. No, it wasn't a year actually. Around the time that I joined the agency, I decided one thing that I'd always been interested in was like the helping people bit, but was coaching basically. I had an amazing boss at my last company who did lots of leadership coaching, and I was like, literally like, I loved watching her completely she'd take a team who like weren't talking to each other, weren't communicating very well, like all this different stuff. And she'd just make them into like this amazing team. And it was through coaching and curious questioning and stuff.
Yeah.
So I was like fascinated by this. So I was like, sod it, I'm going to invest in myself. I've got a job. I'm, joined this agency. I'm going to do my coaching at the same time. So all of this stuff's happening. And anybody who's trained to be a coach will know that basically if you're going to be taking people through the coaching experience, you have to go through it yourself first.
Yeah.
So it's like
therapy.
Oh my God. Like open this massive can of worms. So I'm finding out all this stuff about myself, and I'm really starting to question how my brain works. And it was just building and building and building. I really wasn't enjoying my job. And I was at my sister's one weekend, and she just asked the very innocent question, so how's the job going? And I fucking burst out crying. Absolutely burst out crying. And I was just like, in this, and I can't do this, and I'm rubbish at that. And it's, and then I just went, and I have to do timesheets.
We don't like timesheets.
And she was like, okay. And I was like, I can't do
the
it.
anxiety,
Can't do it.
task of timesheets.
And she was like, what do you mean you can't do it? And I was like, I cannot physically fucking fill in this sheet.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Everybody moans about timesheets, but I'm getting to the end of the week and I am sweating because I cannot tell you how
you've done it, but
I did it.
in what order?
Not
and
a
what?
clue.
Yeah,
not a clue.
All
You want
at the
me
same
to tell
time
you
as
how
well.
long it took me to write an email? I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget talking to one of the creatives at this agency, and she'd been there for ages, and you will know who I'm talking about. And I remember saying to her, like, I'm really, really struggling with the timesheets. And she went, I know, it's weird, isn't it? She said, you can't just put down, spent 2 hours staring out the window, deciding how you wanted to do this piece of work. She was like, that doesn't fly kind of thing. So anyway, so I had this conversation with my sister, and she's my baby sister, but she should have been the older one. And she basically said, have you ever thought that you might have ADHD? And what she didn't know, what nobody knew, was that for about 6 months right up until that conversation, that is all I had been researching.
Right.
Like, honest to God, I literally sat one day, put into Google how I was feeling. This is before ChatGPT. Just put into the search bar all the ways that I was feeling, and just got reams and reams of articles about ADHD.
Yeah.
And I was just like,
Was your brain imploding at that point?
I was really embarrassed.
Yeah.
Like really,
embarrassed.
embarrassed.
Was that the first thought?
I went through such, like they call it like the grief curve. I went through so much grief.
Yeah.
Because one, you think you're mad because no professionals diagnose this in you. You think you're joining the bandwagon. Yeah. And also you're like, I mean, I would have been 31 by then, 30. How have I got this far? I'm doing all right in my job. How have you
never been pulled up on it?
Have I literally been winging this my entire career? And the answer was yes. So anyways.
I think we're all.
Yeah,
we all have elements of that.
So I ended up going for a diagnosis. I went private because I went to my GP and they were like, great.
I've had the waiting list for years.
See you in 5 years.
Yeah,
And I was like,
yeah,
not a
you have
fucking
to
chance.
pay that,
So I went private, got the diagnosis, didn't tell anyone, but I did share it with my employer, with the agency. It's a small agency. ADHD wasn't getting as big as it is now.
Yeah.
They didn't handle it very well. I'll leave it there. And it was around that time that I was like, right, I need to start taking some responsibility and accountability here for my career, for my business. Around the same time, I was loving the coach training. Like, I literally couldn't get enough of it. Started the Joy Project on the side. Got to a point where I was like, I think I can do this full time.
That must be really scary when you think, I want to do it, but it's a lot.
So I always tell people it was December 2022. And I said, it was Christmas break. We'd like agency Christmas break. And I was like, right, I'm going to give myself 12 months. So by the end of 2023, I'm going to go full time with the Joy Project. We went back to work in the January. And you'd gone on maternity leave, I think, by the end of January, literally 30 days later. I was like, fuck this.
You'd already made up your mind.
Handed my notice
Yeah. I think that's a good position to be in when you've decided, like, I'm doing it now, and I'm okay with it.
I've never been so terrified in my entire life. I'd always had my mum in the back of my head saying, don't ever leave a job unless you've got like another job to go to, blah, blah, blah. And there's me like, I'm going to become a life coach. Yeah. But could you imagine, like, my friends thought I'd lost the plot.
Because people will go, all right then, she'll be back in a job in a few months.
So that was the thing. And I think that was what I had in the back of my head. If this doesn't work, I'm employable. I'll, find another job.
Yeah.
But basically, long story short, to bring it back to ADHD, as the Joy Project was building, just through my Instagram content and stuff like that, I realised that I was attracting clients, other women, who either thought they had ADHD or had been diagnosed and were really struggling.
Yeah.
And my training, as great as it was as a life coach, wasn't quite equipped for that.
Yeah.
Right.
So I was like, right, I'm going to train up again. So I did another course in ADHD coaching. And to be honest, I mean, it massively helped me, but it meant that I could help these other women as well.
Yeah.
And that's kind of brought me full circle to where I am now. So I don't just predominantly work with people with ADHD, but it is there if people so wish to use it.
Yeah.
Right. That's interesting.
Do you just work with women, Meg?
No.
Right. I didn't think you did, but I wasn't sure.
So the whole, like, you lot all know as marketing, I had to niche down. And that's where the good girl thing came from. Very much like good girl millennials, traditional path, traditional route, always play by the book, perfectionists, people pleasers.
Recovering people pleaser.
Yeah, literally. So that's where the good girl thing came in. But no, I've got a couple of one-to-one clients who are men.
Do you think you have more female clients because, not to generalise, do you think women want to deal with it more?
It's the same as
when
therapy.
they go, right, something's not quite right with me, like I need to sort of act on this and mask it better.
The one thing I will say, and I can't believe I'm going to admit this, men are easier to coach than women.
Really?
Well, yeah, because you're like, I'm just looking at the boys. You're like, let's get this shit done.
Yeah.
Let's get this.
Yeah, you're
Whereas
right.
women have to fucking overthink
you're
everything.
right.
I'm saying that as someone who does it all.
I'm glad you're saying that. Anyway,
So I think men are more reluctant to come to anything therapeutic, whether it's coaching, therapy, counselling.
It's a pride masculinity thing to some degree, I think. Yeah.
But men will, this is really generalising here. In my experience, they get quicker results.
Because they want the job done.
Yes.
In inverted commas, like, let's sort it out then.
Yeah.
Right?
Basically.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So from back to ADHD then, just for people that don't really know what it is.
Yeah.
Because I have a perception in my head of what ADHD is, but I suppose how would you describe it?
So and this is where people, there is, the ADHD community, this is where there are kind of like two camps, maybe, if you like. So like, if you look in like DSM, which is like, this book of like mental health disorders, blah, blah, blah. ADHD is, I'm going to get this wrong now, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And it's the word disorder.
Yeah, it's quite negative, isn't it?
I have a bit of an issue with. And what it's basically saying is it is a brain that is different to a neurotypical brain, the same as autism or anything like that. So yes, absolutely, it can be disabling based on the fact that you have a brain that works differently to the way society believes your brain should work. But it's my belief that, and I saw it explained this way, so I'm stealing it, but I loved it. I saw a doctor on a different podcast basically explained it as it's just a different category of mind. Yeah, that's all it is.
Yeah.
And people will say no, because there's issues with like your dopamine. Sometimes you get too much dopamine, sometimes you get too little. And that's all that ADHD basically is. It's dysregulation of things like dopamine and cortisol and all that kind of stuff. So yes, that can feel disabling when you work and operate and live in a world that is based on schedule and routine and a set way of doing things. It's literally
tailored to neurotypicals.
Basically, which is, that's what is where we are, right? So as much as I understand that it is classed as a disorder, it has been of benefit to me, and I think to my clients, to think of it as that's the way your brain works.
Well, it's like anything though, isn't it? And everyone has things that they're good at and things that they're not so good at.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I'm sure people who have ADHD or are on the spec, I don't really know that much about it, so like, I'm maybe good or bad to have on this, but yeah, it's a spectrum, innit? You're good at some things and you're not so good at other things, and it's getting the best out of yourself or people who you work with. That's what you want, don't you?
Yeah, and as a friend of mine, Leanne Maskell, who's really, really big in like the ADHD community and has helped many, many people. And, she often says, like, when you meet one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. And it's like if you met,
of course.
It's like if you met one person with dyslexia and decided that another person with dyslexia must have the exact same personality, the exact same traits, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it just doesn't work that way, And I think
that's the key thing.
Well, that's where it's becoming a bit of not a bit of an issue, a massive issue when it's coming to diagnosis, because all of the research, all of the the assessments that we do and stuff like that, this is all based on young males. Right?
Is it?
Yeah.
The typical neurodiverse, which is not like all of them, is
there was
it?
a belief at one point that women couldn't have ADHD, girls couldn't have ADHD.
Yeah.
It
It wasn't the diagnosis for females, was it?
For
Until
God's sake.
really recently.
2008, 2009 was the first time that you could diagnose an adult with ADHD.
Really?
So if you got to 18,
you grew out of it.
if you got to 18 and nobody diagnosed you,
You
fell off the spectrum, basically.
Yeah.
And that's where the work is now beginning. We, so for little girls, for example, so the hyperactivity, it's that common thing, isn't it? Boys with ADHD running around the playground, like being disruptive, blah blah blah.
Boys
like,
will be
super
boys.
hyperactive.
Yeah.
Because they display it physically.
Right.
What we know is that little girls, females with ADHD, the hyperactivity is all up here.
Yeah, and they mask it physically.
So they're the girls in the classroom that were the daydreamers, were probably quite chatty, were looking out the window all the time, but had like 1,000,001 thoughts, were probably quite over anxious, overthinkers.
Yeah.
So that's where the work has to be done now. Now, if you then apply that to the workplace, you now have an even bigger issue on your hands. So
it just becomes very complex, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But that doesn't need to necessarily to be intimidating, does it? It's just I think to gain more of an understanding is key here, isn't it? And to listen. And
and I did a post on LinkedIn the other day about if you think of ADHD as well, if you had like a team right at work, you're managing a team, and you think of them, and go with me on this, think of them all as like your like workhorses kind of thing, right? So they all have their job, they've all been trained, right?
Yeah.
They all know what they're doing. They're strong. Maybe some of them need training in slightly different ways. Maybe some of them are a bit more stubborn than others. But you have your team, and as a leader, like leading your horses, kind of thing, like blah blah blah. So they all have these amazing qualities. They all look different. Maybe they're different breeds of horse, whatever. But you have your horses. In my head, ADHDers, and I maybe would apply this to people who are on the autism spectrum as well, are like your unicorn.
I knew you were going to say that.
right?
Yeah.
So your unicorn comes in and you're like, oh my God, this person is so sparkly and they have so many ideas and they're so chatty and they get the rest of the team going, and we can throw anything at them and they just crack on with it, like just this magical unicorn, right? And then after a few months, they get bored of the mundane. And they're a bit hard to manage, and maybe they get a little bit forgetful, and maybe their ideas are just a bit too sparkly, a bit too magical, whatever, and they just won't get in line with the other horses. That person is either going to get fired, they're going to go on the sick, or they're just going to leave, knowing, because you've now left them with that experience, that it is not a good thing to be a unicorn in the workplace.
Oh, right. So
Yeah.
is that like, is, you know, when you say after like 2 or 3 months, is that from like an output, a capacity perspective, or is that an ideas like
a bit of both?
Yeah.
So common traits with ADHD is, so the science behind it, a neurotypical person with a neurotypical brain has a importance-based nervous system, right? You prioritize to-do lists, stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, you're not perfect. You sometimes mess stuff up and other things might be more interesting, but that is how your brain works. So if you were, I always explain it of, let's say you met up with a friend for coffee, right? And you're sat on a bench in the park, and you know, your brain knows that the priority, the most important thing is to listen to your friend that is sharing their, life update with you at the moment, right? And there's lots of other things going on in the park, but priority, I'm going to listen to my friend. An ADHDer has what we call... Is this making a lot of sense to you?
Yeah. It is, no, it's
An
great.
ADHDer has a interest-based nervous system. So importance-based nervous system, interest-based nervous system. So that means same person sat on a bench talking, catching up with their friend, except they have an ADHD brain. They know it's really important to listen to their friend, but there's a really cute dog over there. And actually, this coffee order isn't what I ordered. And those kids are so annoying, screaming over there. I didn't know there was a river going through this park. And I wonder where that plane's going. Because all of a sudden, your brain...
I can relate to that in some degree, but not to that level.
You know what your friend is saying. Is important. You know, it's a really boring wedding story or something. You're like, oh no, it's
but
important.
You should look interested.
But that puppy is so much more interesting to my brain right now.
I see.
That is ADHD. Now imagine you're in the workplace.
Not being able to not say the thing,
Now imagine you're in the workplace and you're asking your ADHD employee to do something that is so fucking boring. It's a priority. It's important, like a timesheet, but it is so boring.
They just won't do it. They put it off and put it off and put it off.
Their brain,
but what happens if that's their job to do that?
And that's where we have the issue. Because how can you force a brain that is based on interest to do something that it really doesn't want to do? So then you either take medication, which helps you focus more and do the thing. You do more exercise, which gives you the dopamine. Maybe you go for cold water dips. You do all these different things. You use a life coach. You do whatever it is to basically adjust your lifestyle. So in the workplace, for example, actually, do you need to let that ADHDer get that hour in the gym in the morning and start slightly later than people? Because when they walk through the door, they've already got their dopamine. They're already set and ready to go. Or do you say, right, your timesheet that you have to do, I am going to jump on a call with you for accountability, and I'm going to be on the call for you. And all you're going to do for 30 minutes is complete your timesheet. But I am there. So the interest is the challenge and the fact that I am there watching you do it. So accountability is a massive thing for ADHDs. It's really helpful, like body doubling and stuff like that. So it's that kind, if I think I run a business now, it's like, how the fuck do I do this? So admin wise for me, I'm like, right, how do I make this interesting? How do I make my brain want to do this? I'm going to take myself out to the coffee shop for the afternoon. I'm really good friends with the girls that run the coffee shop. So I'm going to tell them, girls, if you see me on my phone, tell me off. So you have to start.
You have to have the accountability.
Is that two-way? I suppose when it's like employee, I know you run your own business, so I'm sure that's, I know that's hard to motivate yourself anyway. Or the motivation comes in waves. And myself, being in business now 11 years, like stuff can really beat you down hard, and it's not very nice, and you have to pick yourself back up again. And that's kind of that is kind of a motivating thing. But I suppose, is it like, say it's like a boss and an employee, or an employer and employee? Is it having that two-way honest conversation to figure that out?
100%, completely. It's about, so if I think about before the agency, like the company I used to work for, My boss was so fluid. She was so chill. That's why I think I went undiagnosed for so long, because she just trusted me to get my work done.
Right. So nobody held you accountable
No,
at that point.
and this is the thing. Like, ADHD is not bad employees. They do absolutely get their work
and really
done.
fucking passionate as well.
So passionate.
Yeah.
There's a thing called hyperfocus where you basically just get something done. And,
and you've been doing it for 6 hours.
Yeah, and my boss, like, she didn't care if all I've done is chat all day and then gone home and done the work.
Of course.
Like, she doesn't care because the
output's
work's
the most
getting
important
done.
thing. Whether
I've got 2 friends, and one of them is diagnosed and one of them is undiagnosed. And they're both really, really different people and like work in very, very different ways. But I suppose one of my questions is like, do you think it's detrimental to an individual who isn't yet diagnosed, even though they're pretty sure that they've got it? Because then, not that you would use it as an excuse, but you can't excuse your way of working if you haven't got that diagnosis. You know, like, why, for example, let's use timesheets. Like, why didn't you do the timesheets? They can't say, "Oh, I'm sorry, my brain doesn't work that way," because the employer is surely going to say, "Well, that's not good enough."
Yeah, and I think this is where it comes to in terms of, like, you know, because I've got, you know, people who have come to coaching with me and they're like, "Oh, I feel like an imposter, like I haven't actually got my diagnosis yet." But interestingly, and I went through this as well, right? One day you're not diagnosed. The next day you're diagnosed, nothing fucking changes.
Yeah,
you
and then
still
you're
have
like,
the
now what do I
exact
do?
same brain.
Yeah.
So, and I'd coach people and they were like, you know, I just need to get the diagnosis. And I'd be like, okay, what do you think that's going to do?
Yep.
Well, I just know now, and I just know. So then things can start getting better. And I'm like, your
it don't work like that,
brain
does it?
doesn't change.
No.
So
And it can be a period of
actually-
a few years after the diagnosis, can't it?
So actually, I think, you know, with your 2 friends, for example, or like where it, like, does it become detrimental if you don't have ADHD? What if, you know, big sky thinking here, what if it didn't actually matter about the label and it just mattered that all of your employees have different brains? Like, you know, there's a common belief that in about a decade, neurotypical won't be a thing anymore. Everybody just has different brains. So then it becomes, which we've been doing for years in the workplace, playing to your strengths.
Yeah.
And all that
like the red,
different
yellow,
kind of
green,
stuff.
blue person. And,
but there's more knowledge and I suppose understanding and research behind it.
It's sitting down with your, you know, each of your team or your whoever your employees are and going, how do I get the best out of you? You know, there's another guy like in the kind of like ADHD community, Joseph Pack, and we share very similar beliefs around like medication and not taking it and like, you know, choosing lifestyle adjustments instead. And he, you know, he figured out, he is self-employed, but he figured out he works best 6 till 2. And that's when he works.
Yeah.
And okay, I know that that's harder in the workplace. Yeah, in the morning, 6 a.m. till 2 p.m. And that's him done.
But some work better 6 p.m. till 2 a.m.
Yeah.
don't
Oh
they?
yeah, they do. Yeah.
And I know that that's harder
Yeah.
for a workplace, for a company to get their heads around. But fuck's sake, 5 years ago, every single person had to come into the office, and we never dreamed of possibly changing it up where people worked from home until we were forced to think that way.
Yes.
And then it was like, oh, actually, it kind of works.
Yeah. So is
and
that
work-life balance and stuff?
And I don't know the answer to this, but is that what's happening now? The whole, you know, ADHD conversation. Autism as well, which is a really quite a big comorbidity. Lots of people with ADHD have autism.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you about that actually.
Yeah.
Is ADHD the same as autism? Is it?
So no, but they share. They can share characteristics, and it can be even harder, to be honest, because, you know, you might have, you know, I've definitely had clients before that have got both. So where their brain is like super scatty and they're maybe quite a messy person or whatever, but they really, really need order. So so comorbidity is where you can have like more than one diagnosis, basically.
Right.
So yes, I don't think this is complete. I want to say 60%, but I could be completely wrong. It could be more or less. But yeah, a lot of people will get simultaneous diagnosis.
So there's a big crossover.
Yes, huge spectrum crossover.
Yeah.
I think this is, sorry to interrupt you. Like when I was at uni, well, my first job was at Mind. I was like market manager there for 5 years. This was fucking hell, Jesus, 17 years ago now, which is crazy. And that's what I did when I came out of uni, and all the conversation was about mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And about like it's still like to some degree, like 1 in 4 of us have a mental health issue. There was such a big stigma behind it then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
These are the days like we had like probably Facebook had just come like on the scene from like a social media perspective.
Yeah.
But then we were having like even like bipolar. That was a thing.
Yeah.
And we kind of I knew back then, probably before I went to Mind, is that if you had bipolar, you were on a spectrum to some degree.
Yeah.
And loads of people are living their lives on this kind of spectrum of bipolar. I know it's not the same, but I feel like
But it
now,
did have a big prevalence at one point, didn't it?
now we're moving into like rather than being just about kind of mental health,
Yeah.
which I know is different, but we're still talking about our brains.
Yeah.
We're now moving into a more of a neuro diverse kind of conversation, which I
Yeah.
think is really good because it's a lot more proactive than.
Well, it's it sounds really simple, right? But it's like everybody has different body types. Different sized hearts, kidneys, all these different things.
Yeah.
Why can't
Why would
they
your
have
brain be the
different
same?
brains?
100%.
You know. But interestingly, on the bipolar thing, I think it's 4. The average woman will be misdiagnosed with 4 other things before ADHD.
Yeah.
So, for example, I think I got diagnosed with GAD, with generalized anxiety disorder, when I was like 26.
Yeah.
And then like 4 years later, I remember talking to the psychiatrist about it and said, so do I have GAD as well? And he was like, no. He was like, the anxiety is a symptom of the ADHD, the anxiousness, the overthinking, the racing thoughts. It wasn't generalized anxiety disorder. It's a symptom of the fact that your brain is struggling to operate in a neurotypical world. And I think absolute mental health, let's say mental illness, that should never stop being talked about at all. It should always be an open conversation. But this is the thing with ADHD, like it's not an illness. It's not a disease to cure.
Yeah.
It is just the way your brain works. And unfortunately, because of the way we're brought up in society and Western world and all these different things, other symptoms start to come out. So mood swings. ADHD is a massive emotional dysregulation. That's where the bipolar diagnosis can sometimes creep in.
Right.
So is that because people are masking it then as well?
Yeah. So you get a personality disorder because they just seem to be quite vacant. No, ADHDers can fall into, you can get bouts of like disassociation and some stuff like that sometimes. Right. So and this is what I mean, right? It's a minefield. We've got so far to go with fully understanding this. But
God.
Yeah, some ADHDers are really introverted and some are really extroverted. Yeah. So you'd be like, well, they don't fit the bill. But there isn't a specific bill to fit because everyone is so different.
And I like to think about, like, I think it was the pre-Raphaelite, which was like this group of like artists, right? Hundreds of years ago. It was a really good program on the BBC with, I think it was Aaron Turner was in it. Anyways, I was obsessed. It's really good. But Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood was this group of artists, like really, really famous, like painters, sculptors, blah, 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 right? And I've got this theory that actually, like, because ADHD's it's not just come out of anywhere, right? It's been around for hundreds of years. It used to be called like hyper something or whatever.
Yeah.
And if you think about the artists, right, of the world, the bohemians of the world, stuff like that, with the messy studios and the half-finished paintings and so romanticized and so up and down with emotions and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Like,
it's glaringly obvious.
That category of mind has not just suddenly come out of nowhere, as people would have you believe, because of
it's not the internet.
Social media and internet. Yeah, like it's been around for ages. I just wonder if it used to be more accepted, and then the Industrial Revolution came in, where it's scheduled
be in line.
9 to 5, get on
That's
the
a good
line,
point.
all that kind of thing, which is great for the neurotypical brain, and then pushed out any other kind of brain.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Take.
It's probably a big thing to say.
Our brains are like
zero proof, but it's a theory I'm working on.
Yeah, definitely. I know what you mean. But it's just like being an academic or a creative. Those two minds are really different. And like we were talking this morning, weren't we, about doing a 9 to 5 office job? For some people, that's like a big fat no, and I couldn't ever imagine doing that. Why would you sit at your desk all day? But then some people like order.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily a neurodiverse or neurotypical mind. It's just the way that person's mind works. Someone else might like to be out on the road and, you know, kind of like visiting clients for a living and things, but that might really stress somebody else out.
Yeah.
Like it's like you said, it's not something that needs fixing. It's just literally accepting that everybody's brain is different, like everybody's body is different.
Completely, basically, yeah.
Which doesn't seem like a very profound
Big
thing.
No, like
doesn't,
it's
does
really
it?
simple.
Yeah.
Like it is what it is, and it makes that person who they are.
Yeah.
And do you think like part of that is just to try and be as non-judgmental as possible? How can employers, do you think, and people that are in more management positions help with this, and not even help them get the best out of their team? Because it benefits them and it benefits the people who
I think it's that thing, isn't it? Like if you it's going back to like the unicorn, like how do you make sure you're not going to lose the unicorns in your team? Is it such a massive issue that they come into work a little bit later than others? Is it such a massive issue that they need you to check in at the end of the day and see how they're getting on? Is it such a massive issue that they need you to pay for them to have a little bit of coaching? Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
And you might get so much more back from that person because they feel supported.
Exactly. It's what's the agenda that you're currently trying to push onto the employer that actually employee, sorry, but for what purpose?
Like, why did you want them in the first place when they interviewed for that role? There must have been something that you saw in that employee that you liked. So how can you support them in order to bring that out and it benefit your company?
On the flip side, people can still be shit.
Yeah, we've said, haven't we? Like, you
Absolutely.
can't use it as an excuse.
Completely.
Yeah.
No, completely.
But
People
it's the
can still
accountability
be-
again, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you can't just go,
and I
I'm
think-
3 hours late because ADHD.
Well, that's where it comes into as an employer.
I might try it on Tuesday then.
That's where it comes into as an employer, like how educated are you? How knowledgeable are you? You don't have to. I'm not saying you need to know absolutely everything there is to know about ADHD, but you know, if your employee comes to you and tells you, I've just been diagnosed with ADHD. First of all, that was a massive fucking thing that they just had to do.
Yep.
But then
it's a long process.
How can I help?
Yeah,
How can I help
Yeah.
you? Because I tell you now, if they came to you and said, I've just been diagnosed with dyslexia, you wouldn't bat an eyelid.
Yeah.
So why is it any different with something like ADHD?
Yeah. Definitely. Mind
Mic drop.
imploding. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
You speak a lot of sense though. And it's good to speak to someone who actually has it, as well as having the knowledge on it and being a coach.
Yeah,
because we could have a conversation, 3 people with a neurotypical mind, for example, and we might just be talking absolute bollocks.
But you know what? That's fine too. Talk about it. You know,
Yeah.
I remember I had friends who were quite resistant to it. My parents, who were really liberal, quite resistant to it.
It's definitely
It's
a
a stigma.
generational thing. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so you know, I'm happy if friends want to ask me about shit. I really don't care when, you know, people are like, oh, I think like, I can be a bit ADHD sometimes. I'm like, cool. What is it exactly that makes you think that? Oh, well, I really struggle to focus sometimes. Great. What do you want to do about it? You know? So then I start going into coaching mode, which my friends hate. But you know, and I think that's where I maybe rub some people in the ADHD community up the wrong way, because I'm super chill about it. I'm not taking offense when people are like, oh, everybody thinks they're a bit ADHD nowadays.
So you don't see it as them jumping on the bandwagon.
That's
No,
more
I'm
like a
like,
good thing that
whatever.
they're actually involved in discussions
Yeah,
rather than it being
definitely.
like...
They want to know about it.
Well,
Yeah.
And that's what, you know, I use the example dyslexia quite a lot, but you know, like if you think about it, like at one point it really wasn't that well known or diagnosed. Whereas now, if somebody got diagnosed with it, you'd just be like, oh really? You wouldn't be like,
Yeah,
well,
you're right. You don't really
I
have a
get my
second
spelling
thought.
wrong. Everyone thinks they've got dyslexia. You would just never say it.
The big thing with that was as well is like, I remember in school, in primary school, like the kids would say, oh, I've got dyslexia. And you were like, well, what's that? It's like, oh, we can't really like read or
Can't
write
read
or
or count.
see letters, or I don't actually know what it is.
Yeah,
but like,
Well,
it's
again,
funny,
that's
but-
really varied, isn't it?
But it's
Massively.
but then I was like, right, fine.
Yeah.
So
Is
then
what it
I
is.
have just grown up this person
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
just been, if someone's got dyslexia, then it's just been like, fine.
Yeah.
Like,
You
doesn't-
don't look at them and
doesn't
think
make them
they're
have a
going to be
lesser
a calamity
person, or
at work.
it doesn't
do you?
mean that they're going to be rubbish or terrible at their job. It doesn't
Yeah.
make any difference.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's kind of what we're moving into. So, you know what you say, rub people up the wrong way. So, like, so ADHD, I've seen the ADHD community blow up, I would say, especially on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And there are some people who are quite attacky.
Yes.
And maybe people that don't agree or don't understand.
Yeah.
So what is going on there? Like,
I think that the diagnosis can really liberate people, which is fantastic. But I think it then can lead to, especially if you're stuck in that grief cycle of, you know, I've lost all these years and that's why I've always been shit at jobs and, you know, job hopping, like, you know, you start to attach, the ADHD starts, or the diagnosis starts to like explain a lot of like past experiences. So that's a lot to take on. So dare I say it, it can push you a little bit into a victim mindset. And I use that word very delicately, but it can push you into a frame of mind where, because you have felt so misunderstood and maybe attacked a little bit, you know, throughout
which is
your
fair enough.
life,
It's
like
it's a valid
attacking
place.
back.
Yeah.
kind
Even
of
more if
thing.
you've
It's
had
like,
like a
fuck
late
you.
diagnosis.
Here's my time.
Basically,
Yeah.
it's, you know, so I think, you know, people feel very strongly and very passionate about, you know, the conversations that are happening, which is great. But, you know, for every person who makes a slightly negative comment about ADHD or whatever, you know, for me, I guess from a coaching point of view, I just see that as like, what's the fear behind that question, or what's the fear behind you saying, oh, everybody thinks they've got ADHD? You know, I don't want to say rise above it, but I can just zoom out a little bit and see it that way. It doesn't bother me. Say what you like.
Exactly.
Like, I don't care about
It
trolls
doesn't affect
and stuff.
you
No.
or your diagnosis
Yeah.
and the way you live your life, does it?
And I think some people have got that diagnosis, it's liberated them now, so they're like on the attack basically of almost like it was self-protection, self-preservation,
I
isn't
think
it?
it's because they've maybe had like a late diagnosis and they've thought, well, I've really fought to get here.
Yeah,
and you're just insinuating
this
that you've got
explains-
ADHD.
Yeah, this explains everything now, and I deserve this support and this help, and like I'm disabled. And look, if that is what helps you and that is what you want to believe about yourself, that is absolutely fine. But there are some of us who it doesn't help me to think of myself as disabled. I have created this lovely life and I've created this business based on the fact that I have made lifestyle changes because I know loads about my brain now, and
Exactly.
that's like
Yeah, yeah.
awesome, great. Okay, so I need to
Amazing. That is
run my
that is
week
yeah,
this
that's
way,
just
like-
liberating. Yeah.
You've created the life
100%.
that you're happy with.
Yeah, I think it's that idea of I won't allow this to keep me small.
Yeah.
Dare I say it?
Yeah, like use it to your advantage. It's something amazing to you as a person, so why not use
And
it
I
to your
think
advantage?
That's where category of mind. I just have a different category of mind. And yes, as I said at the start, it can feel disabling because the world that we work, live, operate in is quite neurotypically set up. But what if you took it as an opportunity to actually start showing, you know, some of them at Walt Disney, Simone Biles, who's a Microsoft guy, Bill Gates, all got ADHD. Like, you know, so don't tell me that you can't be extremely successful.
No,
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
100%,
with
yeah.
ADHD,
Yeah.
and that's where I think, you know, I don't know. I just again, it is probably the toxic positivity. I just will not be pulled into any kind of conversations around.
No, because you don't
us
see it as
versus
a
them,
negative.
don't-
It's a
basically.
positive.
I don't really see that as toxic positivity.
No, I don't.
Toxic positivity is when you're being in my opinion, is when you're being positive about something that you maybe shouldn't be being positive
And I
about.
think that's
Whilst
the
I think in this case,
Yeah.
you absolutely should be positive.
So
about
there's
it.
a thing in the ADHD community, big argument around, are you allowed to call ADHD a superpower? And that's where people will say the toxic positivity comes through, because they're
Right.
like, no, it can be fucking debilitating. I know.
Yeah,
I get it.
yeah.
Like, anybody who's like, I wonder
Surely
what
if
it's like
anyone's
to have
allowed, you're
ADHD.
allowed.
Try being in my
Yeah.
brain for
Yeah,
5
yeah.
minutes. Like, you'll go running.
And if you've
kicking
got to a
and
place in
screaming.
your life where you're happy with the person you are,
Yeah.
then that's a superpower in
Yeah.
itself, isn't
Yeah.
it? Like, why should you make it out to be this shit thing
Yeah.
that's going to
And-
impede your life?
But it's like anything, right? There can be loads of different parts of your personality or whatever that can feel debilitating, can feel like negative, at some points. But I'm still gonna, I don't care what people say, I'm still gonna celebrate my brain.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Do it.
I think that's a really it's not
It's toxically positive.
it's not toxic. It is just genuinely
Yeah.
positive.
And why wouldn't
And I
people
think-
want to be around positive people
Yeah. Who are
who are going to pick you up?
yeah.
And like you're then that support for people, like you said, your audience have come to find someone who's accepted their neurodiverse mind, and it's not something to be ashamed of. Like you've created that support and that space for people, haven't you? To celebrate it as well.
Yeah.
So where do you see like this conversation or the way that maybe people with ADHD are kind of treated and diagnosed? And again, it's a profound question. In the next kind of 5-10 years, how do you think it's going to change? Just like, I suppose I think, just to preface that, like the conversation with mental health has utterly, completely changed and has gone for good.
Yeah.
Through social media and that we've got way more ways to communicate now. So obviously it's made it a lot more easy to have a conversation. I still don't think we're like fully there, especially with like talks about suicide and suicidal thoughts and stuff like that. That's still a place of improvement, but it's massively changed the stigma of
For sure.
of people's mental
Yeah.
health. So how do you think it's going to be
Yeah.
a similar rapid?
Yeah, well, I think it's like, if you use your example, right? We were talking mental health. Now we're talking mental disorders.
Yeah.
So it's, I'm going to sound ridiculous here. Like, hopefully just something else will come along that people can fucking
That'll push
argue
this
about.
out, yeah.
And we can just get on with diagnosing people and helping them.
yeah.
That's I guess that's a very, simplified way of looking at it.
There
But
probably will be.
it's like it's like anything, right? It's like evolution. It's humans in general. It's progress.
Yeah,
It's
we're just learning and learning
more
and learning.
research,
Yeah.
especially into women, late diagnosed adults.
Mm.
More research, more, I hope, education around treatments or support, because unfortunately, if you get diagnosed currently,
Yeah.
the first thing they're going to
Yeah,
say
yeah.
is, what medication do you want to try?
Yeah.
And I do believe that doesn't have to be
Yeah.
the case.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like anything, it's just progression. I love to be able to share that it is already happening. People are doing the research. There's stuff
It's been
going,
rapid, the growth that I've seen
Yeah.
just from my eyes.
Yeah, there's
of
stuff
the
going through
conversations.
Parliament around how we support people, both kids in school, people in the workplace.
Yeah.
But yeah, just hopefully, again, same as mental health, that or mental illness, that stigma starts to disappear.
Yeah.
I don't care if people disagree with me. Social media has massively helped people
Yes.
learn and accept and know that they're not alone.
Yeah.
There are
yeah.
some really negative parts of social media.
Yeah.
But open conversation and encouraging conversation with either just things like-minded like groups and communities, even just stuff that you like doing and hobbies and stuff. That's all really positive, isn't it?
Yeah.
The toxic thing about social media is the comparison culture and Instagram.
Yeah.
And I look at that person and think, not that I do, but they've got a better life than me.
Yeah. So maybe a
God.
neurodiverse person
Yeah.
might be like, well, they're dealing with it fine. Why am I not coping okay with it?
Exactly.
With
And
my
I think
diagnosis,
that's
but-
where there's a responsibility then for people like me who are maybe on the front line, have a decent Instagram following, to be open. And I am
Yeah,
open
you are
about the
very open.
negatives and the
Yeah,
positives
yeah.
and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But the other part of me being on the front line of it, if you like, is that I am working with these incredible people who, and helping them through diagnosis or adjusting their lifestyle or whatever it is, and and seeing them shine, seeing
Yeah.
them absolutely
Yeah.
Well, that's great. isn't
really
it?
come
that's
home.
really satisfying.
Yeah, really come home to who they are, and making making conscious decisions for themselves about how they want to live their life, now knowing that they're not broken, you know, there's nothing wrong with them. They just have been taught to live and believe and think in a certain way that doesn't match up with the way their brain works.
Amazing. So thank you.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
And where can people find out more about you? And
so unfortunately, I do spend way too much time on Instagram. So it would be on Instagram. So I'm at the Joy Project Coach, and like DMs are always open, always happy to have a chat with people. So that's me. And then if you wanted to find out more about ADHD, my friend Leanne runs a really amazing company called ADHD Works, or there's the ADHD Foundation. The support is absolutely there. And if if anybody watching this or whatever thinks, shit, this makes so much sense, then, you know, first port of call is your GP. It is to go speak to your GP about this. But what I always encourage people to do is, you know, don't just turn up to your GP and think, I saw a TikTok video, or I watched this podcast and I think I've got ADHD. You know, get curious, start writing things down. What are you noticing about yourself? Stuff like that. But yeah, the Joy Project Coach, and DM's always open, always love having a chat with people. And just massively encouraging people to just get out of your own way. We're only here once. Like, you might as well make it count.
Absolutely. 100%.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.